everyone for coming tonight and taking the time to be here. Putting this talk together was very enlightening. I hope you get out of it as much as I did about appreciation for us, for our incarnation, for our body, how much planning, how much work goes into our incarnation. So this year, we are celebrating the 100th year anniversary of the birth of Chico Xavier. So in tribute to Chico Xavier, I have chosen the books, the cases, from the books that he has psychographed. So you might ask, who is Chico Xavier? Well, his mom died at the age of 4. He was born in a small town in the south of Brazil, in a, say, lower middle class type of environment. He only attended school until 4th grade. So after 4th grade, he was not allowed to pursue education. But as we will see through his books, it does not affect, because he's psychographing and he can bring that with, to the books. He became a spiritist at the age of 17, so he was not born in a spiritist family. But since the time he was very young, he had mediumistic abilities. He was able to see, to hear. And he suffered very much because his family did not understand what was happening with him. And as I mentioned, he's a medium, and he has psychographed 419 books. Today, I'm going to mention specifically 13 of them. However, something that's important that, 16 of them, something is important that all the books that he psychographed, he never made any personal gain from any of them. In the sense of the material sense. I'm sure he gained from the knowledge, from the experience, but all the profits, the material profits from the books were donated to charity organizations. So when he wrote a book, he would donate the copyrights to other organizations, nonprofit organizations, many of them to help them to raise money to do their nonprofit work. Here you see a picture of Chico Xavier with his mentor, Emmanuel. And here are several pictures of Chico Xavier. We have here him psychographing books in his older age. Here with his mentor again, when he was younger. So there's many pictures of him, and we can see a shape of his life. And we'll talk about here in Baltimore more about him throughout the years we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of his birth. But today I'm going to talk about one specific spirit that psychographed through him. And as we learned, André Luiz, the author of the pen name of the book, is not his real name. And the reason why he did that is to avoid pain to his loved ones. He did not want to incur pain when he brought up cases about his life, about things that he did. And he was a physician, his last incarnation in Brazil. He was married with 3 children. And he wrote 16 books in 25 years, and they're called the André Luiz series. So as I mentioned to you, there's 16 books. And I'm going to talk specifically about the first 3, especially the Missionaries of the Light. I'm only going to touch on 3 chapters from this book. Vanessa will talk in more detail next week about the other details of the book. So before we start, I just wanted to bring briefly what is reincarnation and why reincarnate. So in the Spirit's book in chapter 4, it says, the return of a soul or spirit to the physical life in another body that has been newly formed for it. So it's when we gain a new body. And this is the process that we're going to talk about in the cases. And why do we need a new body? Why do we reincarnate? For purification, to address previous mistakes, and to affect human process. Most of the cases that we'll talk about today is the second one, is to redress previous mistakes, which is the case of most of us who come to Earth. So let's talk about the case of Segismundo. The names in this book are kind of complicated, but I'm sure we'll get a handle on it. The first one, of course, is our author, André Luiz. Then we have his mentor, Alexandre. Alexandre is the most advanced spirit in this story. He is the mentor as André, as I mentioned. There's also Herculano. Herculano is also an elevated spirit, and he is the mentor of our main character, Segismundo. All of these characters are in the spiritual realm, which means that they don't have they don't have a body. They're discarnated. So, Segismundo, a main character, in his previous incarnation had an affair with Raquel. However, Raquel was married to Adelino. Because of jealousy, Segismundo killed Adelino. The relationship didn't last long. She became a prostitute. Adelino, when he died, because he was killed by Segismundo, had a lot of hatred in his heart, tried to went against after Segismundo, and all of them basically had many debts when they discarnated. So when they arrived in the spiritual realm, they were given another chance after many years of service. And that's where we are now. They're given the chance of reincarnating as a family. The plan is, in the current incarnation, for Raquel and Adelino to be reborn and to get married again. They did. Right now, they are incarnated and living on Earth, and Raquel and Adelino did get married. They have a boy who's about 3 years old, and they're in the current plan of having Segismundo as their second son. Before Raquel and Adelino incarnated, they agreed to this plan. So they were aware that Segismundo was going to come as their son. Adelino had already forgiven Segismundo. So everyone was on the same page. However, as we all know, when we come and we forget our past and we forget everything that we promised while we were in the spiritual realm, Adelino once again began to have this hatred for Segismundo and was complicating the reincarnation of Segismundo because the affinity wasn't there anymore. So now, the mentor of Segismundo, Herculano, has approached André Luis' mentor to help with this process. So Herculano approaches André Luis and he says, at first, Segismundo was encourages with the best of hope. However, now that his old rival has been sending him thoughts of hatred and jealousy for getting commitments made in the spiritual world, he feels forlorn and not strong enough to redeem this formal evil. At other times, his sadness fills him with profound rebelliousness in such a negative state that he prevents himself from receiving our help. So, Segismundo feels hopeless, is afraid, feels the jealousy, the hatred that Adelino has for him. So all of this is complicating this process of reincarnation. So after hearing the story, André Luis' mentor, who has worked with Segismundo in the spiritual realm, says, I'm willing to help. André Luis says to his mentor, Alexander, can I come? Can I be your assistant? And Alexander says, yes, it will be beneficial for you to go. However, André Luis' mentor is very wise. So he says, but before you can come and help me, you have to spend a week in the Institute of Planning. And the Institute of Planning at Nosolar is where they plan all the reincarnations for those who are in Nosolar. So there he's going to learn what it takes, what happens, what is the process for somebody to reincarnate. So he goes to the Institute of Planning. He spends a week there. And at the end of the week, he joins, André Luis joins his mentor Alexander in going to where Segismundo is going to live, which is Raquel's and Adelino's house. There is Herculano waiting for them. When they arrive at the house, these are what they notice. Segismund is crying. He's afraid of what's about to come. He doesn't want to reincarnate again. He says, I'm going to fail again. Adelino doesn't like me anymore. Adelino forgot the promises. Then Alexander says, you have to raise your energy. You have to be positive. You have to help this process. You can't have this negative attitude. And he asked him to put himself in the place of Adelino. We notice that Adelino's spiritual condition is very bad. He's angry with the world. He has this hatred. And Alexander says, I will try to awaken the sensitive fibers of his heart. Because right now he's so closed, he doesn't want to accept any help. So that's why Alexander says, I will try to awaken the sensitive fibers of his heart. And this part of the book really, really touched my heart. We have this beautiful picture here that was done by Projeto Imagens. And this is basically the scene that's taking place at the house. This is Alexandre. This is Hercule, and this is André Luiz. Here's Raquel, their firstborn, and Adelino. They're having lunch, and Alexander says, I'm going to touch the fathers by the son. And this is a little boy. And the little boy says to his mom, Mom, why is Dad so sad? And the mom said, it's because of his business. And the boy says, I'm rephrasing here, but the boy says, what is business? And the mom tries to explain what is business. And she says that he has many worries at his business. And here's the moment where Dad can relax and be himself. And the mother is so gentle and when she's trying to explain to the son. And the son is asking these questions so gently that the father gets touched. And the father says, finally, I'm not sad. Just because I'm quiet, that doesn't mean I'm sad. And you can see that his whole attitude's finished. And then the son said, Dad, you've been coming home lately. You haven't done a prayer with me in a long time. Why don't you come early today and do a prayer with me? And the father agrees. And to their surprise, the father does arrive in time for the son's bedtime and to do a prayer with him. And this is another part of the book that's very beautiful. The father's now at the house. They go to the child's bedroom. The child kneels down on the floor, puts his hands together. But before he starts to pray, he says, Daddy, do you know what we should do before we pray? And his dad smiles and nods, and the child says, Mommy says that we should call God's messengers to assist us. So the messengers who were already at the house join them, connect with them, and the child says the Lord's Prayer. And this is the description from Netherlands. The scene inside the bedroom was very moving. The little boy was on his knees reciting the Lord's Prayer with childlike emotion. I noticed that the wife was surrounded by an intense luminosity, which originated from the heart, enveloped her husband and her child in gentle radiations. So this beautiful scene takes place. Because of this, Adelino's attitude changes completely. Raquel and Adelino also go to bed. And before the mentors can interfere, the grandmother of Raquel comes. As Raquel is separating herself temporarily because she's sleeping, her grandmother invites her to go pray with her. She's not even aware of the other mentors. And Alexander and Luis' mentor explains she doesn't need to be aware of us because she can't help the situation right now. Because they want to deal separately with Adelino. So Adelino, then, it's his turn, and he starts to separate from the body. However, Raquel's husband initiated the laborious withdrawal from his physical body. Adelino recognized the presence of his own enemy and made a futile attempt to run away. So when he saw Regimundo, he tried to run away, but he doesn't really have the motor skills to do so. So and Alexander is able to stop him before he's run away. And this is what has been happening for several weeks now. So now, here we have Alexander, Herculano. Oh, sorry, this is Segismundo, and this is Adelino. So Alexander touches him with his light. Adelino starts to cry. And he says, I've been seeing a beggar, and he comes to me every night, and I have these nightmares. I try to help him, but I can't. When I see his face, I have this feeling that he's going to kill me. I run away. Sometimes I try to help him, but I can't, and I run away. So then, Alexander brings Regimundo over and says, and he recognizes that that's the beggar that he sees in the nightmare. He says, this is our friend, Regimundo. He doesn't remember the past. He doesn't remember that he agreed to have him as his son. So Alexander says to him, he's a son of God. Why don't you accept to help him? Why don't you help him in the name of Jesus? And Adelino cries and he says, I'll help. And he gives in. And it's beautiful when they describe how the cloud around him, the intense cloud, just goes away. And then Regimundo comes over, kisses his hand, and they explain how this vibration, this connection and affinity between them reunites. And it's so beautiful. And then Alexander goes to Regimundo and says, we can start your process of reincarnation next week. Alexander, André Luiz, and Herculano leave for the night. Adelino and Raquel go back to bed. And now, Alexander, Herculano, and André in the spiritual realm, and Anasalar, are examining the plans for Regimundo's reincarnation. And this is what it says. It's a summary. They examined the geography of the genes in the chromosomes of the future body to determine how they will be able to work with magnetic resources in the organization of hereditary properties. Well, I had to put these words here because I don't think I would do justice to what they're trying to say. So let's break this down. So the geography of the genes in the chromosomes. As you know, the chromosomes are tiny. And André Luiz is trying to look this over, and he doesn't understand. And he even describes it, says, they look like characters to him. He has no idea what these chromosomes are and how they interact. And Alexander says, well, you're not there yet to understand this. And the reason why they're examining, as he says here, is to see how, in the moment of reincarnation, of the connection of the egg and the male sperm, how they'll be able to interfere with magnetic resources. So only the chromosomes that they think are the best resources for Regimundo will appear in the gene of Regimundo. Because we all have the blood, as they explain in the book, comes from the mom. The physical properties, goods, come from the family, come from the mom and the dad. So they have to separate the chromosomes. So only the best, the ones that is for the best for the incarnation, for the planet Regimundo, will show up in the genes. And then Alexander reminds Segismundo of his own personal efforts and acceptance of the situation in order to be victorious in this opportunity. The reason why he reminds him is that Regimundo is going to be aware of his reincarnation. He's not going to be put to sleep. And they'll talk about later how some spirits are basically asleep when they're in the moment of reincarnation because they can't understand the process and they can't deal with the process. So they say it also depends on you. So now we're in the part of the book where Andrea Luis asks a couple questions. And once again, I'm sorry that there will be a lot of texts, but they're so specific that I didn't think I could summarize. So I brought it here. Why so much care with Adelino? So Andrea Luis asks Joshua Alexander, say, why Adelino deserves this? Why was this interference? Why did we go to his house? And the answer is very interesting. It says, Adelino's bitter thoughts were destroying the genetic substance, poisoning the chromatin within its own seminal sac. He could have answered the call of nature and engaged in sexual union, but he could not have been able to achieve the sacred objective of creation. Only love provides life, happiness, and balance. Having changed his inner disposition, Adelino from now on will emit magnetic energies that will protect the elements destined for the lofty service of procreation. So in order for Regimundo to reincarnate, they needed the male genetics, which could only happen if he was having a balanced life, if this hatred didn't exist. So that's why they helped Adelino and seek for Regimundo. So to me it's very interesting because I never thought about this, about how our feelings, how our things can affect, our ability to procreate. So then he also asks, are there spirits who reincarnate unaware of what they're doing? And Alexander answers, just as there are thousands who discarnate daily on earth without the least idea of what is happening to them, the majority of those returning to corporal life on earth are magnetized by spirits benefactors who have organized their redemption task and are led to the maternal temple of flesh like sleeping children. So most spirits on earth, when they're reincarnating, are not aware of their redemption tasks, right, of their plan, and they're not aware that they're reincarnating. They're not aware when the process of connection happens. They're like sleeping children. Then he asks, would Alexander be acting at the time of sexual union? As I mentioned before, Alexander was reading the chromosomes to see how to interfere. So this has to happen, right, at the moment of conception. So he was thinking, so is this going to happen during the moment of sexual union? And then his mentor says, our presence is not necessary at the moment of cellular union. Such moments of conjugal bed are sublime and inviolable in well-founded homes. You know that fertilization of the maternal egg only takes place a few hours after the intercourse. The male element undergoes a long trip before reaching its objective. And then he says, we have time. And in the timeline in this process, they go to bed around 10 o'clock. At 12 o'clock, spirit friends are allowed to enter the bedroom, so only 2 hours after they go to bed. They decorate the bedroom with flowers, and Andrea Luis will describe it. And only at 2 a.m., the spiritual team enters to affect the process of conception. So this made me think about how God is merciful, how He created our body so that this could take place. The tubes, so that the length of them, so the sperm could travel, giving time, so the spirits could have their privacy, and the spiritual guides could also interfere and help those who are about to reincarnate. I mean, it's incredible to think about how much preparation goes into each reincarnation. So there's a fourth question. Can you guys read it? It says, is Segismundo's reincarnation typical? Because when I started reading it, I thought, for him, for all this to be happening, he deserves better. It just means he must be a more elevated spirit. And to my surprise, Alexander answers, Segismundo reincarnation is following the more common guidelines. It is symbolic of the majority of such reincarnations because our brother belongs to the huge average class of spirits that inhabit the physical realms and who are neither excessively good nor consciously evil. So he's an average spirit. So to me, it's rewarding to know that as an average spirit, so much care is going to be taken. Was taken when I was born, will be taken when I have my children, and it's taken for every spirit, of course, of average class. They also comment that spirits who are more elevated basically need almost no help because they're able to do it almost all of themselves. They still receive help. And then they also comment, of course, that the spirits who are less elevated, as we mentioned before, are not even aware of this process. And the last question he asks is, how long will Herculano guide Segismundo? And as we have learned in other books, it's not surprising that Alexander's answer is, he will remain at Segismundo's side for 7 years in his new reincarnation, at which time the reincarnation process will have been completed. I know that our devoted companion will take all possible measures to ensure a harmonious fetal development. So Herculano is there before Segismundo reincarnates, before conception, during the whole process of gestation, and for 7 years after he is born. Because as it says here, and as we have learned in other books, only after 7 years, the reincarnation process will be completed. So then, now, it's time for reincarnation. Alexander, Herculano, André, Segismundo, and now we have new friends, the constructor spirits. These are the spirits who are responsible for the reincarnation process. The ones who create the gene plan. So Alexander, who is more elevated, will help them in this process. So they all arrive at Raquel and Adelino's house. And these are the things we learn. We first learn that Segismundo has been undergoing the process of direct fluid connection with his future parents. So for a week, he has been having this connection with his future mother and his future father. And Alexander explains this has tired him significantly because the points are being disconnected and reconnecting to his parents. We also learn that the constructor spirits began the work of magnetizing his spiritual body. And why do they need to magnetize the spiritual body? Right now, Segismundo has a man body, a full-grown man. This body has to be shrunk to an infant size. So Segismundo is shrunk through this magnetized process. I'm not sure if shrunk is the right word, but that's the best word I can associate with. And Segismundo's form resembles that of a child. So Segismundo, who until this day looked like a whole human, if you looked at him in the spiritual realm, he looked like a grown man, now resembles that of a child. So now it's time, and they enter the couple's bedroom. And André describes, the intimate setting was divinely beautiful. Fellow spirits from our plane had filled the bedroom with flowers of light. Hence of his... Oh, sorry. It stopped at light. So, had filled the bedroom with flowers. So they entered the bedroom, and André Luiz describes the vibration level of the bedroom, how hundreds of spirits are there, and how all of them are there to cherish and to be in that moment with the parents. The parents are connected to the physical body, but they're already released from the body, awaiting them. And this is a beautiful moment. Raquel asks the team, can I kneel down and receive the baby in my kneeling? So her and Adelina kneel down, and they're holding the baby. Before they give her the baby, Alexander says a beautiful prayer. And if you like, it's on chapter 13 to read it. It's 2 pages, and it's beautiful. And he thanks God for the creation. He thanks God for the moment, for the parents. And everyone is emotionally touched, and Andrea Luis describes how everyone is sending the best of their vibrations to the couple. And at the end of the prayer, Andrea Luis says, a crown of light comes from the ceiling. It comes to the head of Raquel. He says, I can't see the spirits who are bringing it, but I can see the crown that's touching Raquel's head. And at that moment, she receives the child, and she holds the child so tenderly and loved. And this is how Andrea Luis describes. I saw her pressing Segismundo's infant form to her heart so strongly that she looked like a priestess of the power of the supreme divinity. Segismundo connected to her like a flower to a stem. I then understood that the one who would be flesh of her flesh was now soul of her soul. So the spiritual connection is there. So they're permanently connected now. So now that she has the baby, her and Adelino are taken back to their bodies. Alexander asks the rest of the team to leave except for André and the spirits who are helping. And at that moment is when Alexander is going to influence the chromosomes. He shines a light on her female organs. And Andrea Luis describes how, for the first time in awe, he was able to really appreciate the female organ. And he's able to see the egg, and he's able to see the male germinative elements. And then at that moment, André identifies the male germinate elements most suitable and fixes his magnetic power on it, helping overcome its competitors in order to be the first to penetrate the small maternal sac. This should not be André, I'm sorry, it should be Alexander, it's his mentor. So Alexander, his mentor, identifies one. He chooses. Based on what he knows, the history, he's able to see the chromosome. He's able to identify the ones that will be best suitable. And like it says here, it gives an extra power, an extra magnetic power, overcoming its competitors and penetrating the small maternal sac. And later he describes that when this process is not possible, when there isn't a spirit there who selects the best male germinative element, he says the woman's sac has its own vibration. So the sperm, the one that will connect, is the one who's actually in the same vibratory field as the sac. So nature will do this process. Of course, when we can have the help of the spirits, it's better. But she says when that's not the case, nature does that. And then it says it takes about 25 minutes. Alex, he also continues to oversee the process. He says, the instructor touched the minuscule form with his right hand, that is the female sac, maintaining assistance to the chromatic division. Next, Alexander adjusted Segismundo's reduced form, which was interpenetrating Raquel's spiritual organism. Over the microscopic globe of light impregnated with life, I saw that latent life began to stir. So Alexander oversaw the process. When the first divisions were happening, right here, he makes sure that those divisions were correct, were the best, would have the best resources for the newborn. And then he says he connected, adjusted Segismund's reduced form to Haeckel's purged spiritual organism. And the two basically became one. So the spiritual connection to the chromosomes was there, connecting the two. So their service is done. We now have a baby. And they leave. But André Luiz is allowed to visit. And what they say, I've never read in any other books the explanation that they give now. They say, we have what we described, right? The moment of conception. But then, they describe that for the next 20 days, Herculano and the constructor team every day would be there next to the mom, overseeing the process. And no one was allowed to visit. Family members came and they said, no, it's too sensitive. The room was magnetized, so they would be the only ones there. And after, on the 21st day, is when family members from the spiritual realm were able to join the couple. And from that day on until the babe was born, and they would receive visits. And the baby would continue to grow. And then he was born. Segismundo was born. Now, this case takes about 3 chapters in the book. And it's a very beautiful case. But then we have another case that's very different. So I wanted to bring the two so we could compare. This is the case of Volpini. Cesarina is a young lady. She was married. She's in her 7th month of pregnancy. She's pregnant with Volpini. Her husband, because of her obsessors, left her. She went to live with a woman who's taking care of her, who treats her like her own mom, who's very good to her. So André Luiz, with the constructor team, goes there to help with this case. And for him to see how things are different. So they go to her bedroom. He mentions that it's a very nice house, a very nice bedroom. But when they enter there, there's 3 entities, the obsessors. And this is the conversation happening among the obsessors. By what infernal art the intruder is so resistant? We must get rid of him. They're talking about the baby. Then they say, she suits our purpose perfectly. Why should a child mess up our plans? They don't want her to carry this pregnancy to term. They like what she does. They like the things that she does, and we'll see later tonight an example of what she's going to do that night. Then they say, we might be able to finish this up tonight. Then they mention that they were able to terminate 2 other pregnancies. So they say, why wouldn't we be able to terminate this one? So then she arrives in the bedroom. Of course, she's not aware of her obsessors. The mentors are there And they're trying to help her. So in order to help her, they go and touch the woman, the head of the household where she's staying. The head of the household comes and tells her, you shouldn't go out tonight. You should stay here, not in your state. The bars are not the best thing for you in your condition. The man who you're going to meet up today is not the best for you. Why don't you stay home? And she continues to talk until a car comes and honks, and she leaves. And the constructor spirit tells Andre, we did everything we could. The rest is out of our hands. On the way to the bar, the constructor spirit tells Andrea Luiz, she has received help. Her father tried to help her, but she was repelling him, so he couldn't help her. And that caused him to have emotional imbalance. So the superior spirits had to magnetize him so he would forget his daughter. And Andrea Luiz said, I didn't know that could happen in the spiritual realm. And then he said that it's a blessing that the spiritual guides did that to her father. But she repelled her father first. So that's why she doesn't have the amount of friends and family that Segismundo who came every night, who were there to help and guide the couple. Also, because of the obsessors, he explains, the room is not magnetized like Segismundo. Any spirit can come and go in this bedroom. The vibration levels, Andrea Luiz compares the two. It's totally different. So they arrive at the bar. She's there, Cesarina. The instructor approaches Cesarina and removes Volpino, who had been embracing Cesarina like a semi-conscious child. I have disconnected the reincarnating spirit, says the constructor spirit, from the maternal sanctuary. Nevertheless, we cannot forget to administer the necessary help to the reckless mother. So they give her a passage. So the consequences of removing Volpino is not as great. She goes home that night and has to be hospitalized. She has a stillborn baby. So here we can see and compare the two cases and see how the mother, how the parents can very much influence the incarnation of their child, and how so the merits of the child influence their incarnation process. So I'll bring you a quick case from Nasolar just to help us recap. Here's the story of Laura. And here it tells us, once again, that because Laura has extraordinary spiritual credit, she has personally received a letter from the governor, a letter from the governor. As you know, the governor is the highest position in Nasolar, that was sent to the Ministry of Assistance, recommending the best experts to take care of her genetic background. Because in the family that she's going to be reincarnating, there's a history of blood and cardiac disease. So in order for her not to have, once again, the hereditary constraint in her body, they're going to influence. So here, once again, we see that, and these credits that she received while she was working at Nasolar. So what are there constraints? Yes, there are constraints. And in Life Goes On, we learn that the constraints that we have in our life, when they're separating the chromosomes and they put constraints in our body and our abilities, Only this time, they take the initiative of asking for constraints in their lives. They may include home environments which help them counter their inclination, or new bodies in which certain functions will have limited expression. In other words, they take measures beforehand against inferior tendencies that in the past caused them to fall. So here they're saying, we ourselves ask for these constraints. In the book Missionaries Alive, I wanted to mention 2 other cases. One is about a lady who receives her genetic plan, and she goes back to the planning institution and she says, I want my body changed because basically she says, I don't want to be as pretty. I don't want vanity to influence my life. So she asked for her plan to change. Then there is another story of a man who chooses to have a limp. And he chooses to have a limp. He knows he's going to have difficulties, but he says, that will help me with my vanity, my ego, because in my last incarnation, that's how I failed. It will make me work harder and appreciate better. So he asked for the limp. And in the Missionaries of Light, in the same chapter, they talk about the completers. The completers are the spirits who they believe, the spirits guides believe and know did the best that they could with the body that they had. So there are very few who are called the completers. And as a reward of really fully using the extent of their bodies, of their incarnation, in the next incarnation, they're able to choose any body they want. So Andrea Luiz asks the gentleman who's explaining this to him at the planning institution, and he says, so those spirits will choose a perfect body. And the gentleman says, far from it. They choose deficiencies and other constraints because they know that they do not want to fail. And these constraints will help them in fulfilling their tasks. So even though they can ask basically for anything they want, as a reward, they choose to put constraints also, so they can better succeed in their next incarnation. So I want us to think for 5 minutes. What are the constraints that we were given and the resources that we were given? So let's all, at least, we don't have to share, but think. What do you think was a constraint that you were given and a resource that you were given? Does anyone want to share? If not, that's okay. So we all keep it to ourselves. But before we go to sleep, let's think about this. As we learned today, there's so much that goes into the preparation of our incarnation, of our bodies, of the resources and the constraints that we have. So we don't take our resources for granted and don't complain about our constraints, but acknowledge them. Acknowledge them as something that we picked because we knew it would help us. So these constraints and the resources are both to help, not to fail us. Well, thank you for your time. Oh, you can make any questions you want. I was going to open for questions or comments. So thank you. So now, if you have any questions or comments.
When you say constraint, we always think about physical constraints, some limp or visual defect or something. But I think it could be expanded more, like if you're born in a certain type of family, that family, for instance, imagine a Japanese family with this old tradition like mine, being the oldest, so I was very much influenced by my grandparents' education and the way they went to Brazil, versus a more resourceful family with more cultural freedom, behavioral freedom, not much clear about the responsibility of the eldest daughter or eldest son, like we have in the Japanese family. So I think this is a constraint. And of course, with the constraint comes the resource. So we don't lack of resource in order to do the best with this constraint, right? So I want to comment on this.
No, you're exactly right. And it says here, these may include, the constraint says, these may include home environments, which is what you're mentioning, in which in which help them counter their inclinations, or it can be what you were saying, the physical bodies. So it's both, like you're saying, it's both. And both of these are to help us to counter whatever we might have done in order, to fail.
Yeah, because I imagine that in the previous life, I may have expanding too much, lack of responsibility, be a child just the whole time, be the little, child, many sisters to take care of me. So this time I came as the oldest with a lot of, the string being pulled every time. So it's interesting to think about this.
Well, thank you for sharing. Any other questions or comments for tonight? No? Very quiet group.
It is just a comment when you mentioned that Alexander, the mentor, chose the best male sperm, the best according to their plans. I was thinking of how evolved, how advanced they are, that you cannot even imagine how he could choose one from, what, millions?
Millions, yeah, it says there are millions there.
Yeah, so just this comment, yeah.
No, that is very true. Our sciences still have yet to evolve a lot. Just learn a lot. One day we'll get there, maybe in 1,000 years or millions of years.
You said about those guys in the first story being normal, not so bad, not so good. But the guy killed.
Yes.
So that was, I don't know why he was so...
But he was average, remember? He wasn't perfect. But we can't judge, right? Maybe in this reincarnation we are better, but in the past we haven't. And from the way they talk in the book, while he was in the spiritual realm, he did a lot of good deeds, like Laura in Osalar. So he had the merit of the help. And there were decades between these reincarnations. So there was a lot of service done. So yes, he might have made a mistake, and he acknowledges that, right? As he about to reincarnate, he says, I'm afraid of this, of failing again. He understands that his father-to-be was his adversary. He calls it, right, his enemy. But they have to repair. And in his heart, like Andrea Luis says, he's not perfect, right? His tendencies to the good, but he's not consciously evil. And I think that's the most probably important point. He's not consciously evil. So he doesn't have any, evil. Of course, if we say bad is the absence of good, so it's not, we're not born bad or evil, but he doesn't have the conscience of evil, like meaning to do evil. Okay. Any other comments? No? Well, I'll pass it over to Leo. Thank you for giving me this opportunity tonight. Sorry, Vanessa will make the closure.